All right, guys, welcome back to Hobson's Choice Harleys. We just finished up the 1980 Wide Glide in our last video. Today we're moving on to, I've got to get the Servi-Car out of here. Out with one, in with one, tear one apart. Still waiting on the paint for my Softail Sally over here. She's patiently waiting for her tins to come back with the new tank and the fender and all the doodads I had painted on her. All right, guys, so we jockeyed left to right, right to left, moved some parts around, got this bike to where I can play with it. So basically, we're gonna tear this bike down. All the tins come off, the oil bag, the primary, the wheels, the shocks, transmission, basically everything but the motor and the frame. Start tearing this thing apart and save all the pretty parts, because a lot of this stuff I'm gonna use on my next build. Everybody jokes and harasses me. In fact, we've lovingly called this bike the Miami Vice bike because of the colors and the paint job. Very 90s, but there is a lot of hours and money on this paint job. Somebody spent a lot of money to paint that the way they did. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with it, but I'm keeping them for sure. And probably all this turquoise will go on the next bike we build. So for today, we're just gonna try and take it apart without beating anything up. This bike has a lot of really cool parts on it. These Invader wheels out of the 60s with a brand new chrome juice brake. You don't find that stuff anymore, and this has never been run. This is all brand new. It's just been sitting. The front wheel is a matching Invader wheel, and it's hard to tell over here. This is a PM Performance Machine caliper and a custom front fork setup. It's a narrow glide. Just a lot of really cool parts on this machine. If you watch my channel very long, you'll notice that I buy and sell a lot of bikes and trade. Another cool piece on this machine, this is just sitting here. This is a custom sissy bar luggage rack into, it's not a crazy Frank's fender, but it's pretty close. It's a strutless fender. So you don't have the struts here like you do on most bikes. It bolts here and the struts are built into the fender, so it's solid. And again, if you look at that paint scheme, that planetary stuff has come all the way down through here. This is a really cool paint job. Don't know what it's going on yet, but to be honest with you guys, the old lady fell in love with this paint job and she threatened to kill me if I sold it. So we're going to put it on something. So see, even our derby cover has got that planetary paint job on it. Somebody had a lot of time or a lot of paint on their hands. It's pretty. It's well done. The only thing that's odd about this whole deal is the inner primary on this machine back here is factory kickstart only. So this is a 1972. If you look up here, there's no hole here for a solenoid or a starter. So this bike is designed to be kickstart only. So while I'll probably use the primary and the tins, I'll probably use an aftermarket chrome inner so I can put a starter. Because I don't mind kicking a little bit, but I'm getting too old to kick, man. I can kick that Servi-Car all day long because it doesn't have enough compression to kill you, but I've been kicked in the back of the leg by more Shovelheads than I can count, and I'm tired of getting kicked back. Not saying I won't kick a bike. I kicked that FXWG this morning until I got it started. It's just anything I can put a starter on, I'm going to. I caught all kinds of grief on my 62 Panhead. If you guys watched any of the videos of my silver 62 Panhead that I traded out, I put an electric start on that, and people thought it was sacrilegious to put a electric start on a Panhead because Panhead only had electric starts in 1964, 1 year only. Well, my 62, I put a Shovelhead transmission and I put an electric start on it, and I loved every minute of it. I build bikes for me, not for anybody else. I get a lot of naysayers about some stuff. It's pretty easy to be an armchair quarterback and sit there on your computer and pick somebody else's work apart. I try to not ever do that because each man's going to build his bike the way he wants to build it. So there we go. There's our outer primary and there's our inner. And this is all belt drive and it's not brittle and it's not cracked. That's a good viable belt drive. In fact, yeah, see, this bike has never been run. I really scored when I bought this thing. So I'm going to put these screws back in here just so I don't lose them. You know, I probably got 20 sets of these primary screws, but if I got to go dig out the screws for this when I'm going to assemble it, I'll never find them. So we'll put all these screws just in there so we don't lose it. All right, guys, so a couple weird things. If you look at this, this is what they call a 9-hole outer primary. See, there's 2 holes here, but down here there's only 1 hole. So this is the old school 8-hole primary with a newer 9-hole primary. This motor is a stock 74-inch 1972 Shovelhead motor. It's been totally rebuilt. The engine, the transmission, top end, lower end, has never had oil or gas in it since it was rebuilt. I'm saving the transmission. I need a ratchet top for my next project. This motor is really clean. You can tell by the fasteners, the washers. Somebody took their time. They didn't just hobble this thing together. This was a well-built motor. A lot of you guys that are riding newer stuff would laugh because, I mean, it's a 74 cubic inch. I think it only puts out like 62 horsepower. It's plenty fast. I've been riding these things for 35 years. I don't need any more than a 74 cubic inch. Give me a 74 cubic inch with a 4-speed ratchet top. I'll ride that thing all day and love every minute of it. Yeah, it's an interesting bike. I mean, if you look at this, I mean, even these are chrome button tops on your rubber bumpers. Nobody does that. I mean, this guy's got as much money in fasteners as a lot of people do in their whole motor rebuilds. It's amazing the condition of the fasteners that he used. I bought this bike as it sits, totally rebuilt. All it needed was to be the wiring put on it and basically heat cycled and ran. It was pretty much a done project. I bought 3 bikes, 2 frames, and 30-foot trailer full of parts off of her. Unfortunately, her husband died, so I think this was the project he was in the middle of working on. The other 2 bikes were decent, and I ended up selling those for parts. This one I was going to keep and rebuild, but you know, I got so many other projects that I'd rather do. Not sure which direction to go other than this one is, oh, we got a couple more holds here. So I was talking earlier about how this is a kickstart only bike. If you look at that battery tray, that battery is tiny. It is a 12-volt system, but basically it's kickstart only. You don't need much battery if you're just firing your spark plugs. You just got to be able to get the spark plugs to fire. Once the engine fires, it pretty much is running on its own power, and you just are creating enough power off the regulator to charge the battery. The big battery bikes are basically to run your electric start, and there's none of that here to worry about. Basically, this would be a perfect chopper because you can do the old 7-wire chopper wiring system. You need a headlight, tail light, coil, and regulator, and points. You really don't need a lot of bells and whistles to get this thing running down the road. See, and we're over on this side. Oops, dropping parts. But even on this ratchet top, all your fasteners are chrome acorn nut. Even your fasteners for your engine case halves, your jug fasteners, everything. The guy has just painstakingly made sure that everything was beautiful as this bike was going together. So this is my ratchet top that I'm keeping, and she's beautiful. Kickstart, but I can add, all I have to do is have a ring gear in the primary, which I have a dozen of those baskets laying around. This will run a starter. It's just not set up to run a starter now. So we're going to try and get this out of here without too much work. Kind of cool. This is also stock 1972 oil bag because it has, I can't get it to come off, the fill here with the filter in it. So my 69 has that without a side fill. So 69 was the last year of that. You had no side fill. Your filter and your filling was all through the top. They did away with this part of it, and you just have the lunch box that you fill over here, and you would put an external oil filter on it. So this is a cool part, even though it's a kickstart only setup. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to get this out until I pull the primary. Yeah, I can't get it out that way, and I don't want to scratch up this primary. So we're going to leave that sit where it sits for now. And then chances are pretty good that I'm going to have to get my big compressor out here to get the main crankshaft bolt and then my transmission main shaft bolt off. We'll try it with a socket, but typically that's got to have some air. It depends on who assembled it. I don't know if he's got Loctite and all this stuff or not. Kind of cool to have this belt drive set up. Again, this is a chopper special because there's no ring gear. Even if you wanted to add a starter, there would be a gear here that the jack shaft would engage the primary. So it's a kind of a high-end part here, but chopper only. I know quite a few chopper guys. This might end up in their pile of stuff. You never know. I've got a couple other belt drives around here that have the ring gear, and I much prefer that. Now I should have, and I didn't. You know what? I might still. See if I can get that to grab. Nah, never mind. So I was going to, and I will when I go to assemble it, is that you can, when those springs are intact, like so you can pull this off, put a big washer here, put this back on and tighten it, and pull this whole pressure plate with the springs attached so that you don't have to fight to put them together. But I'm a long way from using this for anything, so I'm not worried about it. So we're gonna look here. Yeah, see, this bike's set for a long time. See all the surface rust on these? Yeah, and the plates are even froze up. You know, the fibers aren't too bad a shape. They can probably be reused. Until I figure out what I'm doing with this machine, I'm just gonna take it apart. Yeah, see, I got stuff in there. All this stuff's gonna have to go through a parts washer. But let me see what I can do. Let me see if I can get that bolt off without the air compressor. Yeah, I think I'm dreaming. I'm gonna have to get my compressor over here for that. Okay, so I haven't dragged the compressor over. I got to get these nuts off with my impact. So we're just moving on to other stuff. All these forward controls got to come off. So I'm going to start working on getting some of that stuff off. They sure come apart a lot easier than they go back together. Wow, that's incredible. So down in here behind, no surprise, there's a bolt under there. What is a surprise, not a bolt, a nut, is just like everything else on this bike. The nuts back there are chrome acorn nuts. Back there, you couldn't see those if you had to see those. This guy was going as close to showroom as he could. So I'm gonna make sure, see that chrome acorn nuts, those aren't cheap. And to put one back here, wow. The case bolts have even got acorn nuts. This guy, this was going to be his pride and joy. It's almost a shame he didn't get around to finishing it. And now it's going to become at least two bikes. I had a 78 FXE that was just a beautiful bike, and I'd spent years building it, and I sold it a couple years ago to a kid out of Huntington Beach. He hardtailed it, and that bike was just absolutely gorgeous. A lot of people were trying to give him grief too about chopping up a pristine numbers matching belly number bike and frame with paperwork and making a chopper out of it. Luckily, I've done enough of these that I have a pretty good working knowledge of all this stuff. Shovelheads are kind of been my bread and butter. That's what I've always worked on. It's definitely my passion, something I've been doing for 35 plus years. And it's been the shovels. That was my first bike, was a shovel. And you know, I've been riding them for years. Yeah, you can tell this bike's set for a long time, even with all those beautiful fasteners, the crust and the junk. I don't know how long this bike's set, but it will be alive again soon. Nice set of forward controls. I don't know if I'm going to sell these or keep them or what, but they're nice. So these three shouldn't have any nuts on the back. These three actually bolt right to the frame because it's a stock frame. This should be a stock mount up. The forward controls aren't stock, but the mount locations on them are. Okay, so there we go. One forward control assembly coming apart. This is kind of a cool deal here, guys. If you look at this, and he's got it tied to that case bolt, that's spring loaded, and that holds your voltage regulator from coming unplugged while driving down the road. You don't see many of those. Well, I personally don't. It's kind of cool. This is an air scoop and an oil cooler. I've got to pull that out, but I got to figure out how that's attached. I hadn't figured that one out yet. Okay, so we're moving on with this side of the bike. We're going to try and get this set of forward controls off, and it should be a matching set. This actually has the master cylinder, newer style master cylinder, running back with a rubber brake line to that juice brake. And I think that juice brake, they quit making that in 72. After that, they went to a hydraulic disc brakes. So this would be the last year for the rear juice brake, is what they call that. It's a hydraulic actuated, but it's a drum brake, not a disc brake. Everything from 73 to present is disc brake front and rear. Like my 69 has the same drum rear brake. It also has a drum front brake. Talk about a nightmare to try and stop. I mean, it does okay. I've got it dialed in pretty close, but you ride newer bikes with dual disc hydraulic brakes, and then you get on something like this with old school drum brakes, it is not the same animal. Not anywhere close. It looks like to me this whole oil cooler assembly is hooked up to the motor mounts. There's one. Okay. That means that this one's still hanging on by its chinny chin chin. So there you can see your aftermarket oil cooler. The air sucks into here. The oil from the motor is going through it, and those fins catch the air and it cools down your oil for the motor. So very cool aftermarket piece. And this is all color matched, so I'm going to save this. You can see how long these bolts are because they went all the way down inside that oil cooler bracket assembly. So what I'll do is I will put a couple of, I'll just put a spacer in there and a nut and just snug it down. Then I can get this out of the way. There ain't no chopper builder around that's going to use that. And you never know, I might. It's pretty, it's in good shape. I don't know if this is aftermarket or not. If it's not, I'm amazed just because it's so shiny and pretty. But it's got the rubber bumper and everything. So all the washers, all the fasteners, again, really went above and beyond on everything he built. So we're gonna put those on. That's kind of a hard piece to find, that rubber bumper. This rubber bumper with the double for the horn. They're hard to get loose. Let's see if I can get this nut. All right, she's trying. Looky there, we got her, guys. So maybe I'll quit building motorcycles and start just selling chrome parts. I mean, I got enough stuff on this thing, chrome doodads, for all kinds of bikes. Again, that chrome nut back inside there, once the tanks are on, you'll never see that. I like the acorn nuts and the finished look on stuff that you're gonna see. I've never gone to the extent of putting high-end fasteners in places that nobody can ever see. That's just the way I roll. So we're getting more naked as time goes on. So this is a shock mount. That's where your exhaust pipes go to. I might be able to salvage, I'm going to, but also my main objective is just to help keep brothers like me keep their bikes on the road. And if they need the parts to do that, and I've got the parts to help them, you bet I'm gonna help them. Also, while we're working on this, I need to give a big shout out to my buddy Doc Wellbon. So Doc's up in Colorado, and I bought some parts off him. I've sold some parts to him. Bought my old sidecar off of Doc, and he owned a Harley dealership, and he's a Harley certified mechanic for years. And that man is a wealth of information. I get stumped on anything, I can call that man, and he will walk me through every step of any process, and does it because he just enjoys sharing his knowledge. I wish there were more guys out there like Doc. So Doc, I appreciate all your help, and will continue to call and drive you crazy every time I can. We're just kind of going part by part. We did get the coil out of here. It's hanging here. That's the main circuit board for all the wiring. So we're trying to disconnect all the wiring and keep it more or less together so it's feasible or usable. That's our neutral safety switch. So we're going to try and pull those wires off. There's one. Get that one off. Yeah. Okay, so those come down. Over here, we've got our brake wire and our neutral safety switch. So this is all stuff I personally don't put on bikes, but it's always nice to pull a complete harness apart in one piece. This is kind of cool. I don't know if you can get in here and see this, guys. So this is just your brake sending unit. So when you put pressure on this, it illuminates your brake light. But see how they've got screws here? This was the last year for that. After 1972, they went to a blade style that you just plugged the wires onto. Guys that are really concerned about having a perfect 100-point bike for judging, if you get judged on a show bike, you've got to have everything for that year correct. Wouldn't bother me to put the blade style on a bike, but it's kind of nice to have the right parts. Like to save all the parts, save all the ends. Typically, I just build my own wiring harness like I had talked about, just a 7-wire chopper style setup. But you never know who's looking for a 72 wiring harness backbone. So there's 2 harnesses. There's from your switch, your backbone harness, which is that circuit block I just showed you and all this stuff. Then there's your handlebar harness, which is the other half going up to the front to control your starter, your blinker, high beam, low beam. So I like to keep as much of this stuff intact. A big part of what I do around here is resell parts. We do our best to take a minute. Funny, years ago when I was starting doing this stuff, I'd get a bike like this and I'd just start taking wire cutters and just cutting everything out because I wasn't going to use it. Wasn't until I got a little older and a little wiser that I figured out, hey, a lot of that stuff you're cutting and throwing away. See, that's a complete harness. Everything's there. All the ends are on it. This has never been beat up or cut or butchered. So yeah, if nothing else, the harnesses are nice just to have your color combination. You'll see here's a front part of a front harness, and you can see that all of these wires connect here that go to the headlight, and then you have your idiot lights in the headlight, your generator light, your oil light. I just had a guy yesterday looking for a front harness. He's going to build his own, but if you've got the right colors that'll meet your factory manual, then you can build your harness or attach to a harness and have all the right colors in the right places, which just makes diagnosing problems in the future a whole lot easier. So that, I think, is almost all the wires. This wire, if I'm not mistaken, is fed through here. So that's coming off your voltage regulator. So this bracket is your bracket holds your clutch cable on one side and then your oil bag on the other side. So we're just going to try and get rid of it all together, and then we can get the oil bag out of there. Okay, let me get I think they're called a universal. I've always just called them a wobbler joint. So you put a wobbler joint on your socket, and then you can go at an angle and it'll turn when you got a tight space. There's some limitations to it, but something like this gets you far enough away from that frame that I can actually turn this ratchet and get that bolt loose. See, I can pull that off and it'll fit any 3/8 inch socket, Allen key, whatever you want. So you notice as I'm pulling stuff apart, there's washers dropping. Don't reuse washers. I like to put new flat washers whenever I'm doing anything, or lock washers. It's a pretty cheap expense to make sure you've got a nice flat mating surface. I mean, you get a washer like that that's bent or warped and you try and crush that up against something, you're going to mar the surface at the minimum, or you're going to not get a proper seal on your bolt. This one don't want to go. All right, so this one I'm gonna have to get a regular Allen key. I can't get a socket in there. Let's see if I can get to it with this. See how it's rounded there? I can go in at an angle and it'll still grab. You can't really break the seal loose that way, but once it's loose, you can use one of these rounded end Allen keys to get stuff at an angle. Sometimes you just gotta be patient and do your 1/4 inch at a time. The other side came out easy. I should have done this one first. Okay, so I'm gonna come around this side, and now that it's loose, I wonder if a guy could one removed oil tank. Now you can see that bracket. See, the oil bag goes on this side. The clutch cable goes in here and goes right underneath it. Very minimal play in there. I mean, you got to have this stuff dialed in just right. So that cable goes through here, under the oil bag, and onto your clutch lever. So this is all just stuff you learn over the years, trial and error. All right. Again, I've got 1/2 dozen of those, but can't ever have enough spares. All right, guys, we're gaining. So next we got to either take off the rear end or the front end, finish the primary and the transmission. This is almost a disassembled machine. All right, you guys made it to the end. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please kickstart that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, comment what you guys think. Let me know if you have any suggestions for video ideas or topics you guys want covered, and I'll do my best to include those in my next projects. You guys can also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Also, don't forget to check out the Beacons link in the description below. See you next time.